Hey, welcome back. It's a Thirsty Thursday edition of Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm John Tobacco. We're coming to you from the Question Tequila Studios, as we do every single day, noon to 2 Eastern, Monday to Friday. Now, before getting into our next segment, which I need very badly, a lesson in mental health, I had promised you that in this segment, we ended the last segment talking about global warming and climate change and all this other stuff. And I promised I was going to show you a science experiment, like a kindergarten thing, like for the science fair, to debunk some of these stories. So here is a full glass of water shaped like an iceberg. It's loaded to the gills with ice and water. The water, as you can see, is right up to the top. I'm going to leave it here on my desk for the rest of the show. What do we have left there? About 30 minutes. And you will see that the water does not overflow the top. The ice melts and disperses into the water. So all this stuff about the icebergs melting and raising, we're going to prove it right or wrong right here. Now, on Friday, on Monday before we left, we had, was that Monday or Friday when
I don't know what you're about to say.
Run DMC was in here? Friday, we got so lucky, we got one of the most famous DJs of all time, DMC from Run DMC. And now we have the next most famous DJ, DJ Jaffe, here with us to talk about his book, Insane Consequences, and how this crazy, horrible attack up in Muncie, New York on these on this Jewish...
And he wasn't, and that's likely due to the New York State having way too narrow civil commitment criteria. In New York, the law requires you to become danger to self or others before you can be treated over objection, rather than prevent it. It's also due to too few hospital beds. There aren't enough hospital beds for the seriously mentally ill who need them, and also we don't require people to stay in treatment after they leave the hospital if they've been dangerous.
So, related to, many people were saying this was an anti-Semitic attack. It's your view that it wasn't related to race or religion. It was simply a mentally deranged person.
Well, they're not mutually exclusive, but apparently his searches for anti-Semitic literature was only immediately before the attack. It wasn't a long-term thing. When you're psychotic and delusional, you sometimes develop this paranoia, and you find that you have these delusions about race groups, ethnic groups, and all that. So I wouldn't say they're mutually exclusive, but certainly the family believes it was mental illness.
So there's an article, I think it's in the New York Post today. The mother says she was concerned about exactly this, that he could become violent. She called the police and asked to have him committed, and instead the police came, and according to the assailant's mother, they only questioned him and threatened him with arrest about a potential knife incident. Is that your understanding of what happened?
Yeah, and the family has become the institution. We are given responsibility, but not authority. So the only thing we can do is we can call and say, well, can you help my relative? And they'll say, nope, there's nothing we can do until after they become danger to self.
So if you're a family member of somebody that's seriously or violently mentally ill, the lesson there is they will get no help unless, involuntarily at least, unless they're violent first.
And if you're well enough to walk into a hospital voluntarily, there's a catch-22. You're considered not sick enough to need admission. So it's difficult to get in voluntarily or involuntarily.
I mean, talk about a backwards system. No,
it sounds like a conundrum. Yeah. If you walk in and say, hey, I need help, then that means, well, he's not insane because he knows he needs help.
Right. There's not.
But meantime, isn't there an old adage, like the first step in solving a problem is admitting there's a problem?
Yes, and for 40% of people with schizophrenia have something called anosognosia. They don't know they're ill. When you see somebody walking down the street going, I am the Messiah, it's not because they believe they're the Messiah. They know it. Their illness tells them it is so. And treatment can free them of that psychosis and enable them to engage.
So in New York State, I know we have something called Kendra's Law. Isn't that exactly what Kendra's Law is designed to do, is prevent people, is to allow them to be involuntarily committed?
Yeah, Kendra's Law is terrific, and Mr. Thomas probably met the criteria. It allows courts to order people up. The mental health system does not focus on the most seriously mentally ill. Money is not the problem. Mission creep is the problem.
I know you were at the White House recently for a summit with President Trump for Mental Illness Awareness Month or Week. What were you down there for exactly, and what was the reaction to what you were saying, like, down at the Trump White House?
Well, it's very interesting because, first of all, I'm a liberal, so it was very gracious of him to invite me. And he has called for a lot of the right things, albeit using politically incorrect language. But he has called for greater use of civil commitment. He has called for more psychiatric hospitals. And there's no one outside the mental health industry who doesn't believe those are needed.
So it seems, in your view, and I appreciate you saying I'm a liberal, but even someone like you who's thoughtful and understands this whole mental health stuff, Trump he may not say the right words, but his actions, you believe, are in the right direction when it comes to mental health.
Yes, on this issue, and he's done other things on this particular issue that indicate that we have to focus on the most seriously ill. We have to send them to the front of the line rather than jails, prisons, shelters, and morgues. And in New York City and in California, those are two localities with massive amounts of money, but it's not going to the most seriously mentally ill.
I want to ask you, DJ, I have been living in New York my whole life. And I think, we hear about it in San Francisco and other places, but I feel like over the last few years, I am seeing just more and more and more people wandering the streets, like you said, saying I'm the Messiah, and they're screaming and yelling, and it seems to me that the mental health thing is not getting any attention anywhere.
Well, it's getting attention, but what's happened is that every social ill is now being wrapped in a mental health narrative and funds diverted to it. So, when I went to school, if I got bad grades, I get a tutor. Today, I get a social worker. If I bullied someone, I'd get detention. Today, I get a social worker. So poverty, unemployment, bad grades, angst about gender identity, all these things are now wrapped in a mental health narrative, mental health resources going to them, and nothing's left for the seriously ill.
Do you think it could be possible? We talked about this a little earlier. Again, here in New York, Bill de Blasio has taken to allowing parents to not claim their kid's gender on their birth certificate when they're born, right? Do you think that adds to this stuff where kids are being allowed to be non-gender for some time, where they don't even know mentally what they are?
Well, being unsure, it's a little outside my bailiwick, but being unsure of your gender identity is not a mental illness.
No, but I'm saying, could that be a contributing factor as you're growing up to say, my parents didn't even know what I was when I was born?
So, but just going back to this Muncie attack, which is very serious, Governor Cuomo came out right away and said this was nothing short of domestic terrorism. You wrote an op-ed for the Daily News the other day in which you said we can easily write this off as a hate crime or bigotry, or we can actually do something to solve the problem.
Right. And the three things I recommended, one is everyone thinks of deinstitutionalization as a thing of the past. It's going on today. We've lost thousands of hospitals here in New York since between 2010 and 2016. Up in Inwood, they're trying to close the psychiatric unit at Allen Hospital. Secondly, we need easier civil commitment. It is ludicrous that the law requires someone to become a danger to self or others rather than prevent it. And as you mentioned, we have to make greater use of Kendra's law, which reduces homelessness, arrest, incarceration in the 70% range. It saves taxpayers 50% of the cost of care by reducing the use of jails and hospitals, and there's no reason we shouldn't be using it other than there are people, unfortunately many in control of government, who believe that being psychotic and delusional is a right to be protected rather than an illness to be treated.
Well, DJ Jaffe, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. Go out and check out his book, Insane Consequences. There are a lot of things you need to know, we need to know, and the awareness and advocacy to help people with mental health issues plays into a lot of the ills in our society. Thanks for your great insights. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being there all through Liquid Lunch, but don't go anywhere. We're going to come back and wrap up hour 2 with a couple more segments right after this.